I was slicing a mango when the first real crack formed. That morning was so ordinary it offended me. Bright sun. Coffee still too hot to sip. Her walking around barefoot in that blue tank top that always slipped off her shoulder. I asked her what she had planned. She said she might go to that thing Trevor was hosting. Said it like someone mentioning they might pick up milk. Trevor. That name slid into the room like a bad smell. She dropped it casually, eyes not even meeting mine. Just stirred her coffee, clink, 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 and waited. I didn't answer immediately. I just stood there, knife paused midair, mango juice sliding onto the cutting board like it was bleeding. You already know how I feel about him, I said. She smirked. You always feel things about people. I didn't want to argue. Not then. I wanted us to get through one day without circling this drain. But I wasn't about to sit there and act like this wasn't a clear, sharp line being drawn. Don't go, I said simply. Not tonight. Not that party. Not with him. Her spoon stopped. She turned, leaned against the counter, and looked at me like I was some antique she'd outgrown. You don't get to tell me where I can and can't go. No, I said. But I get to decide what I'll put up with. There was this flicker in her eyes, something calculating, something cold, and for a second she looked like someone I hadn't met yet. Someone who lived behind her skin all along. The rest of the day passed like a stretched-out silence. I didn't bring it up again. Neither did she. But around 7 I heard her humming in the bathroom. Her makeup bag zipped open. The sound of perfume misting into the air. She didn't come to me to say goodbye. She didn't even bother with a lie. Just keys. Door. Gone. I didn't call her. I didn't follow her. Instead, I picked up my phone and sent one message, if you go tonight, we're done talking. I turned off my phone right after. Let it sink in. Let her wonder. Midnight came and went like a thief. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I just sat there in the dark living room. The glow of the streetlight crawling across the wall. I wasn't surprised she didn't come back. What surprised me was how quiet it felt without the constant buzz of denial in my head. Morning hit hard. The house felt wrong without her, but not in the way I expected. Felt clearer, cleaner, like when a fever breaks. At 9:17 the door rang. I didn't rush to it. When I opened it, she was standing there. But the woman in front of me looked like someone returning from battle. Hair frizzed out from humidity. Eyes glassy wide, jaw too tight. There was no apology in her body, only panic. I let the silence stretch until it hurt. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. It was sharp, almost manic. You're not even going to ask? I didn't, because I didn't need to. She kept talking anyway. It wasn't what you think. Of course it wasn't. I stepped back and left the door open. She walked in slow, like a stranger, like she'd never seen the place before. And then the next bomb dropped. She said, if you're going to hate me, at least hate me for what I actually did. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a party. This wasn't about Trevor. She didn't go to the party to make a mistake. She went because she wanted to make one. Because she had already decided I was done being a reason to behave. And she was about to tell me something that would scorch the earth. She stood in the middle of the room like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to sit. Her arms were crossed, not for warmth but to hold herself together. There was something jittery in her movements, an edge she couldn't smooth out. I didn't offer her coffee. I didn't ask her how her night was. I didn't even tell her to start explaining. I waited. She gave me a look then, one I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Not regret. Something in between, a cocktail of defiance and fear. I didn't stay the whole night, she started. I nodded slowly. Okay. I left early, she added quickly like she thought time could still be rewound. I said nothing. She inhaled like she was about to dive underwater. There were people I didn't expect to see there. Old friends. People from college. You know how that scene gets. You told me you didn't talk to anyone from college anymore. There it was. The first fracture. She paused. Just a second too long. I didn't think they'd be there, she said, eyes darting, voice sharp. But they were. And I stayed longer than I meant to. I could feel her unraveling, strand by strand. And she knew I was watching her do it. You didn't answer your phone, she added. I blinked at her. You saw my message. Silence. Then she laughed again, this brittle thing that barely counted as a sound. You always do this. Turn everything into some twisted test. No, I said quietly. You just keep failing them. Something changed in her posture, like a wall slid into place behind her eyes. Fine, she said, dropping into the armchair like she was exhausted by the weight of pretending. I went. I stayed. I danced. I drank. I didn't sleep with anyone, if that's what you're fishing for. I leaned against the doorway and folded my arms. Who said anything about that? She flinched. I didn't smile. I saw pictures. I lied. She froze. Just a flicker, but it was there. You were wearing something different when you left. Jason, you didn't come back in that dress. Her voice cracked. I spilled something on it, okay? Trevor had a shirt. I wore it home. It wasn't a big deal. There it was again. Wasn't a big deal. I'd heard that phrase before. She used it when she forgot our anniversary last year. When she ran up charges on our joint account for things she swore she'd return. When she accidentally messaged an ex and deleted it before I could read it. Every storm in our marriage started with those words. But now she was spinning them like a shield. Where's the dress? She stared at me. Opened her mouth. Closed it. You didn't bring it back. No answer. Did you think I wouldn't notice you walked back in a man's clothes and thought you could throw some half-lie at me and I'd let it go? Now her hands were shaking. And for the first time since she stepped through the door, she looked afraid. Not guilty. Not sorry. Afraid of what she'd become. I was stupid, she whispered. No, I corrected. You were reckless. And you're only sorry because you're standing here right now instead of waking up wherever you thought you'd end up. She broke down then. Not sobbing. Just cracked at the seams. Eyes flooded, mascara smearing, words stuck in her throat. I wanted to feel something, she said. I said nothing. I don't know who I am anymore. That was the only true thing she'd said all morning. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about a party. This wasn't about Trevor. This was about rot that had been spreading for years under the floorboards of our marriage. And last night was just where it finally broke through. But she wasn't done. Not yet. Because the worst part hadn't come out. And what she said next, it detonated everything. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Just breath. Ragged, shallow, like she was trying to push a confession through a keyhole. She wiped at her face like it might change something. Like smearing the makeup away could erase the damage already hanging between us like smoke after a fire. Then she said it. I wasn't planning to see him there, she whispered. It just happened. I knew exactly who she meant. She didn't have to say his name. The moment the word him left her mouth, the room dropped 10 degrees. Not Trevor. No, someone worse. Who? I asked because I wanted her to say it. I needed her to feel the weight of it. Her eyes searched the floor like maybe the carpet could lie for her. Like if she stared long enough, some version of the truth might rewrite itself. You remember Nolan? I blinked once. Sharp. Clean. Yeah. I remembered Nolan. Not just one of the college friends. He was more than that, though she always insisted otherwise. He was the one I had a gut feeling about from the beginning. The guy she told me not to worry about. The one who used to text her on holidays. The one who popped up in conversations like a ghost she couldn't bury. There was always a history there. And now it had clawed its way back into the present. What happened with him? My voice was low. Not threatening. Not angry. Just empty. She winced like the question hurt her more than she expected. He showed up. I didn't even know he was back in the city. He said he just moved back. We talked. That's it. That's it. I stepped closer. One slow movement at a time. Not to intimidate, just to watch her squirm. What exactly did you talk about that made you forget to come home? Her lips trembled, but her eyes narrowed like she was tired of pretending to be fragile. He asked me if I was happy. I stared at her, waiting for more. And? I asked. And I didn't know what to say. That stung more than if she'd slapped me. She wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. Just standing there, unraveling. And in some twisted way, she looked relieved. Like this explosion was a kind of freedom. I shouldn't have stayed. I know that now. But you did. She nodded, slow, guilty. He invited me to leave with him. There it was. That invisible punch I didn't see coming. And? She hesitated. Her silence was loud enough to answer me before she even spoke. I almost did. No breath in my lungs. No sound in the room. Just that sentence hanging there like a blade in the air, tip pointed at everything we ever were. What stopped you? I asked. She shrugged, helpless. I don't know. Maybe I got scared. Maybe it felt too real. Maybe I thought you'd be gone when I got back. I turned away. Not because I was angry, but because the weight of what she just said collapsed something inside me. She wasn't just tempted. She chose it. She stepped into that moment with both feet, fully ready to walk away. The only reason she didn't was because she chickened out. Not because she remembered she loved me. I faced her again. You wanted to run off with him. No. Yes. I cut her off. You stood at a crossroads and you picked a direction. You only turned back because the road looked worse than you imagined. She didn't deny it. And that was the worst part. Not the party. Not the dress. Not even Nolan. The worst part was that she left the door open behind her when she walked out, and only turned back when she saw no one else was waiting to catch her fall. There was more. I could feel it rising in her chest, pressing behind her tongue like a secret begging to be released. And what she said next didn't just break something. It changed everything. She sank into the couch like gravity had finally remembered her. Her hands were in her lap, fingers fidgeting, nails digging into her skin like she was trying to keep herself anchored. But she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking just past me. Like the version of me she couldn't lie to was standing over my shoulder. I wasn't going to tell you this part, she said. That sentence, those exact words, triggered something in my chest. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I waited because when someone starts a sentence like that, they're about to throw a grenade. He kissed me. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them. Not like she was ashamed. Not like she regretted it. She said it like it already happened in some other life, and she was just relaying the message. Detached. Clinical. Like she didn't want to own it. My jaw locked. Not out of rage. Out of the pressure. Like my own teeth were trying to keep the scream inside. She glanced at me, watching for the reaction. Not because she wanted to comfort me, but because she needed to measure the damage. And? I asked. My voice was like ash. Burned out, brittle. She blinked like she hadn't expected me to ask. I let him, she said. There it was. All neat and brutal. Like she was finally done dressing it up. I stood there and I let him kiss me. I ran a hand over my face because my skin suddenly felt foreign. My own house felt like a stranger's place. My own memories felt like a betrayal. I wasn't angry, I was disoriented. Like someone had shifted the entire world 3 inches to the left while I wasn't looking. And you came back here, why? I asked. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Don't say because you love me. If that's all you've got, I swear I'll lose whatever's left of my respect for you. She closed her mouth. I stepped closer, not to intimidate her, but to close the space between us like a judge approaching the bench. You kissed him. You almost left with him. And now you're sitting here on the couch we picked out together, in the house we bled to afford, acting like this is a conversation instead of a funeral. Her expression cracked then. Finally, like she realized she was standing in the ruins, not on trial. I didn't want to blow everything up, she said, voice shaking. I didn't go to that party thinking this would happen. But you didn't stop it either. I didn't know how. You knew where your mouth was. You knew where your phone was. You knew what I asked you not to do. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. She always cried at the precise moment when she knew I was about to walk away. Not before, not during, after. As if the tears could rewind the tape. You think I haven't been hurting too? She said suddenly, voice sharper now. Defensive. You think I haven't felt invisible these past few months? And there it was. The deflection. The justification. The twist of the knife. I've been drowning, Jason, she continued. You come home late. You shut down. You don't even look at me like you used to. I didn't cheat. She froze. I didn't walk into a room and let someone else touch what was supposed to be sacred between us. I made a mistake. No, I cut her off. You made a choice. Every part of this was a choice. And you're not sorry it happened. You're just sorry, I know. The silence was like a pulse between us. Heavy. Sharp. And then, because she couldn't help herself, she threw the final spark. I don't think I even want to fix this. My breath caught. I came back because I didn't know where else to go. But I don't know if I want to stay. She stood then. Shoulders squared. Like she was daring me to kick her out. Like the confession was a test and now she wanted to see what I do with it. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Because this wasn't the moment to react. This was the moment to decide. I didn't answer her. Not because I didn't have words, but because the ones I had were nuclear and I wasn't ready to start the kind of fire unless I meant to watch it burn everything. She stood there, arms stiff at her sides, breathing hard like she was the one just betrayed. Like the act of telling me the truth had somehow cost her more than doing it in the first place. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Cold, deliberate, slicing through every illusion we still had about who we were to each other. She turned away first. Walked to the window. Pulled the curtain back with 2 fingers like she needed to see proof that the world was still out there. You're not saying anything, she muttered, like that was some crime on my part. I stayed still. Because if I moved, I'd say something I couldn't unsay. And if I spoke, I knew it would be the truth, sharp, unfiltered, and final. But she kept going, filling the room with noise, trying to outrun the weight of what she'd admitted. I feel like I've been in a fog, and Nolan reminded me of who I used to be. Before all this. Before I was just your wife. That word just hit different. Like being my wife had become a prison she forgot she walked into willingly. That's what this is about? I said finally. My voice was low. Cold. You felt small. So you lit a match just to feel the heat. She turned to face me. That's not fair. No. It's accurate. Her face hardened. The emotion drained out. That remorse she tried to fake earlier? Gone now. Replaced with that steel trap look she used when she wanted to end an argument by pretending it didn't matter. Maybe we both knew this wasn't working for a long time, she said, voice flat. I nodded. But only one of us weaponized it. She flinched again. That quiet, involuntary twitch like the words had cracked a rib. You said you didn't want to fix this, I reminded her. So why are you still here? She looked at me then, not like a wife. Not like someone begging for forgiveness. Like a stranger standing in the house of a man she used to love, unsure of how she got there. I guess I wanted to see if you'd fight for me. I actually laughed. Short. Bitter. Ugly. Fight for you. I repeated. You burned the bridge and waited on the other side with a stopwatch. Her eyes glistened, but I didn't soften. Because this wasn't a wound. This was surgery. This was me removing the infection before it spread further. You want me to grovel? To tell you we can rebuild? That what you did can be undone with enough therapy and apologizing. I shook my head. You don't even know what you want. You just didn't want to be the bad guy alone. She took a step back like the words hit harder than she thought they would. And then she said the one thing I didn't expect. The one thing that shifted the floor again. I talked to a lawyer. Time stopped. What? I asked quietly. 2 weeks ago, she said. Before the party. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. But I needed to know what leaving would look like. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to cause more damage. I stared at her. You don't realize how loud a betrayal is until it echoes back weeks before you thought it even started. This wasn't a mistake, I said. This was a campaign. No. You planned your exit. You rehearsed it. Then you left the door cracked open just enough to come back if it didn't go how you wanted. She covered her mouth like she'd just tasted poison. I walked past her. Not toward the door. Just away. I needed space to breathe, to not explode. And that's when she said the quietest thing of all. He told me he still loves me. I stopped. I didn't even turn around. Because if I did, I wasn't sure what I'd do. I stood there, facing the hallway, staring at nothing. Her words floated behind me like a toxin slowly seeping into the walls. He told me he still loves me. Not loved. Not past tense. This wasn't nostalgia. This was real-time betrayal. This was the second betrayal inside the first. And the silence that followed? Deafening. Not because it was empty, but because it was full of all the things I couldn't say yet. All the rage, disbelief, sorrow, and pure psychic whiplash. I finally turned, slowly. Her eyes met mine, hesitant, watchful, waiting to see what kind of man would walk out of that silence. "Did you tell him you loved him back?" She didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she sat down again, like she needed a base to keep from collapsing. "I told him I didn't know what I felt," she said softly. "That was worse than yes. I could have handled yes. Yes would have meant a clean break. It would have meant this was something definable, something I could frame and walk away from. But not knowing, that was a limbo only cowards lived in. That was a doorway she refused to close, just in case. So you kept the option open," I said, almost to myself. "No," she said too quickly. I was confused. I paced the room once, twice, like a man trying to shake off a nightmare, but I kept waking up in the same place. My hands were at my sides, clenched so tight my wrists ached. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. Yelling would have given her something to grab onto. Some proof that she'd still gotten under my skin. I wasn't going to give her that. Instead, I looked at her and asked the real question. "Did you kiss him because you missed him, or because you wanted to hurt me?" That stopped her. I could see it. Like I'd cut into something she wasn't ready to expose. And then she whispered both. There it was. The kind of truth that didn't need a scream. It whispered all by itself. "I didn't know it was still in me," she added. "That anger. That resentment." I shook my head slowly, bitter at how predictable this all was. "And instead of talking to me, you found someone who reminded you of who you were before you ever had to grow up. I didn't plan it. You prepared for it," I snapped. "There's a difference." She blinked. That truth hadn't occurred to her. That she'd been building this bridge long before she ever thought she'd cross it. I sat down across from her, leaned forward. "You were already halfway out the door. That party, that kiss, that was just your way of seeing if the grass was actually greener. You wanted him to save you, so you didn't have to be the one to burn it down." She looked at me like I was stripping her soul bare. "I didn't want to be saved," she whispered. "I just wanted to matter." That hit something I wasn't expecting. Because the worst part, I knew what she meant. There had been distance between us. Quiet little absences that built like sediment over the years. Nights I came home too tired to talk. Days she floated through without asking where I was emotionally. Neither of us spoke the words, but we both felt them. But only one of us turned that silence into a weapon. She stared at me now like maybe there was still something worth reaching for. Like maybe all this mess could be swept up into some tragic, poetic reconciliation. And then she said it. The thing that would kill any hope for that. "He said he wants to see me again." I didn't react. Not outwardly. But inside, something final collapsed. "You already said you don't know what you want," I told her. "But now you've got a decision to make." She looked up, eyes suddenly full of panic. "Jason?" "No." I cut her off, rising to my feet. "You don't get to say my name like we're still us. Not after this. Please." I raised a hand, not in anger, just to stop the next lie before it took shape. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to go. Right now. You're going to take your purse, your phone, whatever dignity you've got left, and you're going to leave this house." "I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem anymore." "But you kissed another man, you made plans without me, you stood in front of me and admitted you thought about walking away, and now you're asking me to give you shelter? No. That's not love. That's cowardice." She stood, slow and shaken, grabbed her things like she was moving in slow motion. At the door, she turned to look at me one last time. "Do you still love me?" she asked, barely audible. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I answered, "I did. And you knew that. That's why you thought I'd forgive you." And I shut the door behind her. The silence after the door shut was unlike any I'd ever felt. It wasn't peace. It wasn't even loneliness. It was annihilation. Like the room had just been scraped clean of a future that was supposed to be mine. I stood there for a moment, hands still on the doorknob, wondering if the air would ever feel breathable again. Then I turned and faced the house. Everything in it suddenly felt tainted. The shoes by the door weren't just shoes, they were reminders. The throw blanket she always insisted we needed, the stupid scented candles she collected like trophies, the picture frames of fake smiles. All of it. Haunted. I moved without thinking. Started packing her things. Not as a statement. Not for drama. I needed her out. I needed to reclaim every inch of the space that had become a stage for a betrayal so slow and quiet I didn't see it until it had swallowed me whole. Her closet was first. Dresses, jackets, that beige trench coat she always wore when she wanted to feel put together. Into bags. All of it. Then the bathroom. Makeup. Hair ties. Moisturizers labeled with words like rejuvenate and glow. All of it out. Each item was like peeling off another layer of illusion. Every time I threw something in the bag, I remembered a version of her that no longer existed. And then I found it. A small notebook. Black leather. Tucked in the drawer under her side of the bed. I almost left it alone. But I didn't. I opened it. Pages. Filled. Dated. Some of them months ago. Some recent. I didn't even know she kept a journal. The first thing I read stopped me cold. Sometimes I wonder if he even sees me anymore. I think if Nolan walked back into my life, I'd follow him without a second thought. Not because I want to destroy what I have, but because what I have already feels half dead. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the book open in my hands, the words like nails through my palms. She'd written about it. Fantasized about it. The betrayal hadn't been spontaneous. It had been romanticized. Justified. She'd built a whole mental world where she was the victim of a love too small for her and Nolan was the cure. She didn't just cheat with her body. She'd been cheating in her mind for months. Another entry. Jason is distant. Always working. I don't even remember the last time he looked at me like I mattered. Maybe I don't. Maybe I stayed because it was easier than starting over. But then I see Nolan's name pop up and I feel something. Is that wrong? Or is that what I've been waiting for? I couldn't read anymore. My stomach turned. She was rewriting our history in real time. Turning me into a cold, absent ghost while painting herself as a woman with no choice but to run toward an old flame. It was the oldest trick in the book, turned betrayal into poetry. But I wasn't going to be a character in her story anymore. I closed the notebook, tossed it into the box with the rest of her things, and called a moving service. Told them I had several bags and boxes that needed to be picked up and delivered to an address she'd mentioned once, her sister's place. I'd looked it up. Made the arrangements. She wouldn't need to come back. Not for anything. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and typed out an email to my lawyer. Subject, divorce filing. Just that. Nothing else. The rest would come later. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't devastated, but because she didn't deserve my tears. She'd had all the time in the world to change her mind, to fight for us, to say the words that might have saved something. Instead, she left the door open for another man to walk through. She didn't fall out of love. She walked, deliberately, and I was finally walking away too. The morning after she left was brutal in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't the silence, it was the clarity. Everything was sharp now. The house, the memories, the lies I digested and pretended were misunderstandings. I wasn't numb. I was hyper-aware, like waking up after anesthesia and feeling every cut all at once. She didn't text, didn't call. Not that I expected her to, but still, I checked my phone more times than I'll ever admit. The moving service arrived just after noon. I watched them haul her things into the truck, box by box. It felt like an exorcism. I signed the paperwork, gave the address, and handed them her notebook sealed in a manila envelope. She'd written her story, now she could have it back. She could read it over and over while she lived in the ashes. After they left, I sat on the porch. Coffee in one hand, the divorce papers in the other. My lawyer had replied already. Efficient, no nonsense. He'd seen enough of this to be immune. I wasn't immune. Not yet. But I wasn't broken anymore. Not in the same way. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I should have gone with that instinct. But curiosity is a brutal disease. Hello. Jason. It was him. Nolan. The audacity actually made me laugh. A short, sharp, disbelieving sound that startled even me. "What do you want?" There was a pause. He didn't expect me to pick up. That much was clear. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "I just thought you should hear it from me." "Hear what?" I said, biting off every word. "I didn't know she was still with you. She told me things were over. That she was staying with you temporarily until she figured out where to go." I didn't respond. Let him twist in it a little. "I never meant to." "Save it," I said. "You're not the victim here. You knew enough. You still went for it." He was quiet for a beat. "She's not doing okay. Just so you know." I almost dropped the phone. "That's why you're calling?" I asked, stunned. "To give me a status update on the woman who tore our life in half?" "She's not the monster you think she is." "Good," I said. "Then she's your problem now." Click. I hung up. My hands shook. Not with anger, but with adrenaline. I hadn't expected to hear from him. I didn't want to hear about how she was doing. She'd made her choice. Let her live with it. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called my brother. He answered immediately. "Jay, I need to get out of the house," I said. He didn't ask why. He already knew. "Come over. Beer's cold. Couch is yours." I drove. Windows down. Music loud. The wind hitting my face like a reminder that I was still here. Still alive. Still free. When I got to his place, he didn't hug me. Didn't say anything sentimental. Just handed me a beer and turned the game on. Half an hour passed before he finally said, "You okay?" I shrugged. "I will be." "You want to talk about it?" "Not tonight." He nodded. We didn't say much else. We didn't have to. Sometimes healing starts in the quiet. Not with answers. Not with closure. Just with space. With someone who doesn't ask you to perform your pain. That night, I slept on his couch. No dreams. No nightmares. Just black, solid sleep. And in the morning, I knew. This story wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. It was about saving me. The next few days moved differently. Not fast. Not slow. Just deliberate, like time was suddenly aware of me watching it. I wasn't moving through life on autopilot anymore. I was choosing everything. What I wore. What I ate. What music I listened to. Even how I breathed felt different. Like I had to relearn what it meant to be a man without her shadow dragging behind me. I went back home on a Thursday afternoon. My brother offered to let me stay longer, but I needed to stand inside the wreckage. I needed to feel the absence of her, not just physically, but spiritually. And when I walked through that door, it hit me in layers. The scent of her was fading. Her things were gone. But the ghost of her choices still lived there, burned into the corners of every room like smoke damage. The drawer where she kept the takeout menus we always argued over. The couch we'd sit on and pretend we weren't dying slowly inside. The mirror by the front door where she used to fix her lipstick before going out, once for me, then for someone else. I stood in front of that mirror. And for the first time, I saw myself, not the version of me she'd turned into a villain in her journal, not the tired, worn-down husband she blamed for her own cowardice, but the real me. The man who stayed. The man who worked. The man who fought even when he didn't know what he was fighting for anymore. I didn't feel proud. But I did feel present. I cleaned the house from top to bottom that weekend. Not because it needed it, but because I needed it. Every swept floor, every empty hanger, every scrubbed countertop was a way to reclaim territory that grief had invaded. I threw out things I didn't even realize I hated: picture frames with no future, souvenirs from vacations that now felt like false advertising, mugs with dumb inside jokes that belonged to people who no longer existed. On Sunday morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it and there she was. Standing there like she hadn't torched the bridge and danced in the smoke. No makeup. Hoodie. Jeans. She looked human. Not broken, but small. And not in the way that made me want to fix anything. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't say yes, but I stepped aside. She walked in like she knew she didn't deserve to, but hoped I wouldn't notice. She sat on the edge of the couch, back straight, hands clasped. I stayed standing. "I'm not here to change your mind," she said. "I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. I wanted to explain." I tilted my head slightly, not encouraging her, just waiting to see what she'd try to sell this time. I was afraid, she said, of being stuck, of waking up one day and realizing my life didn't belong to me anymore. I blamed you because it was easier than blaming myself. I stayed quiet. I let something ugly grow in me, she said. And when Nolan showed up, I didn't even hesitate. I just grabbed the first excuse to escape. And now, I asked. She looked down. Now I wake up every day and realize I burned down something that didn't deserve it. You were never the villain, Jason. I was just too selfish to admit I'd become someone I promised I'd never be. I waited for the plea, for the "can we try again?" But it didn't come. Instead, she stood up, reached into her pocket, and held out her wedding ring. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I finally see what I did. Not just to you, but to myself. I didn't take the ring. Keep it, I said. Let it remind you who you almost destroyed. She nodded, swallowed hard, and walked out. No tears. No theatrics. Just silence. And this time I didn't feel shattered. I felt done. The finality of her exit wasn't marked by the sound of the door closing. It was the stillness after. A stillness that didn't ache anymore. It was the absence of tension in my chest, the absence of that nauseating cocktail of hope and dread. It was realizing that I wasn't waiting for her to come back, not anymore. Not even a little. The next morning, I woke up early. Made coffee. Sat by the window and watched the light change. The house was quiet but not hollow. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a waiting room for someone else's decisions. It felt mine. I signed the final divorce papers that afternoon. There was no ceremony to it. No dramatic moment. Just ink on paper. A conclusion. I didn't feel like I'd lost a wife. I felt like I'd just closed a book that had been lying open for far too long. That night, I went through old photos, not because I missed her, but because I wanted to reclaim the memories. I didn't want every good moment to rot just because the story turned toxic. Some of it was real. Some of it was love. But that version of her, the one who used to fall asleep with her hand on my chest, who used to laugh like the world was new, that version had died long before she walked out. And the man who let it all slide for so long? He was gone too. I didn't throw the pictures out. I just put them away. Not in anger. Just in understanding. We had a life. We lived it. And then we destroyed it. Somewhere along the way, we stopped being teammates and became two people locked in a quiet war. Too proud to call for a ceasefire. And she found her out. She took it. I gave her the chance to be honest, and she chose chaos. She picked someone else not because he was better, but because he was available, and I had the audacity to expect more from her than she was willing to give. Let her be his problem now. Let him wake up at 3 a.m. wondering where she is, who she's texting, whether the way she says, "I love you," still has teeth behind it. As for me, I learned more in those 10 days than I had in 6 years of being married. I learned that love can't fix cowardice. That loyalty without reciprocation is just self-destruction. And that the person who walks away doesn't always win. Because I walked out of this knowing who I am. And she's gonna have to live with who she became. To anyone reading this who's still holding on to something that's already letting go of you, don't wait for the apology. Don't wait for the redemption arc. If someone shows you they're willing to trade your dignity for their ego, believe them. Walk away. Save yourself. And when you close that door, don't look back. Not even once.